Despite the death of Tyler Canary, production continued at the Canary Button Company for nearly 3 years with no real leadership figure. Orders came in and orders were shipped out. The walls of the factory grew and moved like a living organism settling in for an extended stay. The factory pushed onward unscathed, and as it did so, employees came and went with the shifting tides. In the fall of 1944, a meeting was called in the midst of preparations for a rather large shipment of buttons to a purchaser overseas in India. At that meeting, we were introduced to the new owner and heir of the Canary Button Company, Mr. Jameson Von Fleet. Von Fleet, a portly middle-aged man with a comb-over, was the polar opposite of Tyler Canary. Obnoxious and pretentious, he ruled over the factory like a dictator, and although morale slowly drained from the workforce, the production continued to increase, as did profits under his guidance. Bodies in motion, the building seemed to swell and sweat as orders were rushed through production and then out of the building. Von Fleet made his presence known every time he was on the production floor by belittling and abusing his employees. In the time he ran the company, people disappeared regularly. Some made their departures known, some just disappearing during their shifts and abandoning their posts. The departures and failing morale would do nothing but incite more mistreatment by Von Fleet. In 1953, Von Fleet ordered a new wing built upon the factory, and during construction it was rumoured that the crews found remnants of bodies in what would appear to be a large burial mound near the east wing. Rumours never were answered, as Von Fleet used his personal bank account to rid himself of any paperwork and prying eyes during the continued construction until its completion in 1955. April 12, 1955, the East Wing, or Cuff-Link Wing as it would later be called, due to the fact that there were several small production lines that altered buttons into cufflink pairs, would open and production would nearly double in a matter of months. The company financially was at the best point it had ever been, and although there was excitement for the new products and machinery, the Cufflink Wing conditions had never been worse for the employees. The first year the Cufflink Wing was opened, 3 deaths occurred within it. The first was a woman whom had been employed at the factory for nearly 30 years, Darlene McTout. She suffered a heart attack while working on the production line and died before help could make it to her. The second death was a new hire who had only worked at the factory for a few days. His name was Jimmy Etzin. He had mistakenly reached out into a press as it came down to press the button heads on the metal button line. The press pinned him down by the arm, and he died from blood loss shortly after paramedics had arrived. The third and final victim of the East Wing that first year was Mr. Von Fleet himself. In a mid-rant scolding a young woman who had only recently started working at the factory for mislabeling a unit for shipping, he suddenly surged forward towards her, knocking her to the ground as he himself also fell. Her screams would have pulled anyone's eyes to the incident if they were not already watching her being verbally abused. Employees came quickly to remove the man from over the top of her pinned-down body and help Mr. Von Fleet himself as he clutched his head weakly. "There are orders," he repeated several times before passing out on the production floor. He was dead before the paramedics arrived, and quite honestly no one cared that he had passed. There was a sense of peace that came with his passing, not for him but for the embodiment of the factory itself. Production didn't shut down the day of his passing, nor the day of his funeral. From its perch on top looking over Josephine Hills, Pennsylvania, the Canary Button Company watches the world evolve, and as it does so and time passes, the darkness spreads within the factory. The building itself breathes and swells as a continuously growing animal waiting to feed upon the unknowing masses that shuffle around and within its walls. Its windows, like eyes, offer up an eternal gaze across the horizon and into time itself. It was choosing its next figurehead and leading us all into a darkness as we waited for it to decide.